I think ayahuasca and being able to celebrate finally overcoming alcohol has been such a major transformation for me, a relief of suffering and psychological. The transformation just so profound that now I realize I'm really getting a second shot at life.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Master Plant Talk, a podcast about master plants. I am your host, Tyler Hurst of Microdose Yoga. Today I have a guest that I met a couple of months ago at a ceremony down in Tucson, and I want to read you his bio before I let him talk because I think it's pretty fascinating. So here you go. Here's his YouTube bio of his YouTube channel. I am building a bridge from the heart to the mind space. My goal is to help shift perception and awareness aligned to nature using mystic, contemplative tools. I create inner and outer world maps for my fellow mariners, traversing the modern ocean of consciousness to the depths of darkness and to the heights of the heavens. Okay, Aaron, you're going to have a lot to back up on that because that sounded really cool. So, Aaron, tell me more about who you are and what makes you come alive.
Hey, Tyler. Yeah, definitely. Thanks for reading that YouTube description. I came up with that one a couple months ago, so I try to refresh it every now and then to just kind of focus on what is my intention that I'm kind of working with for this season or this year. And so that was a perfect one. Bridge building between the heart and the mind for sure. As far as what makes me come alive, I think just novelty is a huge one for me. Just new experiences and new sensations that I'm feeling, both mind, body, and soul, and just navigating the human experience and forming connections and just seeing what kind of magic I can spark up.
That's pretty fantastic. Thank you. Okay, so we met in December I don't remember what week it was, mid-December, something like that, right? Mid-December, something like that, at a ceremony down in Tucson. Could you give me some background on your psychedelic experience, especially your ayahuasca experience?
Yes. So we did meet, it was the Gemini meteor showers in middle of December. The first ceremony that I attended was in Tucson in spring of 2019. And
Wow.
I've been attending, I'd say on average, probably one weekend a year since then. The last ceremony where we met in December, it had been right at about a year and a half since my last
All right.
ceremony weekend. And then before that was also a year and a half. So early on, I went a little more frequently. And then as I progressed, I felt like I just needed a lot more time in the integration period. And it just seemed to stretch a little bit further to about that year and a half mark.
Okay. I like that. I like that you realize that because a lot of us, I think we start and we go frequently for the first couple of months or years, and then we realize we need more time to sort of figure stuff out. I definitely want to talk about integration a little bit. But first, I want to know what brought you to ayahuasca in the first place.
Yeah, so I found the Tucson group. I had moved to Arizona, and that was my first time really moving out of my hometown and out of my home state and going to a large metro city. And at that point, I was just changing everything in my life. New relationship, new job, new friends, new hobbies, and just trying to do something completely new and leave my old life and timeline behind.
Okay.
It was a bit of a long road getting, I think, to the Tucson group. I had ventured out and was just meeting new people and going to a variety of different philosophy debate groups and just making new connections. And I found myself around some people that were more into the psychedelic and spiritual space, which was way out there for me. I just had great meetings and connections with these people. And then I eventually got introduced to psilocybin. And that was my first real experience. And at that point, I was like, this is way different than anything anyone had ever described for me before. I need to lean more into this and experience what is happening. There was like a little bit of a historical aspect to it as well for me. I was just researching more about ancient history, and I noticed that it was kind of like, I think the Stone Age seemed like it lasted forever. And there was a comment when I was reading where like, hey, they discovered psilocybin. And then all of a sudden the human progression line just started skyrocketing. And then I was like, what did those guys experience? And if that transitioned us from the Stone Age to the modern technological age, I need to experience this in my lifetime. So that kind of was the foundation of how I came to find ayahuasca.
Yeah, so that I know that as the stoned ape theory. I'm sure that's pretty well fixed. I mean, yeah, that's the same thing I believe. Obviously, I can't prove it, but it makes a lot of sense that mushrooms or psilocybin's mind expanding capabilities are what bloomed all of this. And I'm sure people were using ayahuasca too, but you just didn't have access to it, or actually, at least the people who are recording history didn't have access to ayahuasca at the time. I assume you small town, conservative, anti-drug. Like, is that the type of
Oh, yeah.
the type of environment you grew up in? Just like every drug is bad, they're all going to warp your mind type of thing?
Yeah, definitely. So I definitely grew up, I'd say, in a very isolated type of structure where it was very smaller town, smaller schools, Catholic, New Mexican
Okay.
Catholic, Hispanic Catholic
Okay.
community, strict rules around religion, politics, all of that. So it was very strict and structured. So any form of drugs or anything was a huge no. And I didn't even have any alcohol or really partied kind of, growing up either. So I was definitely just isolated.
Yeah, I bet. I know sometimes I grew up in a conservative community too. It's in Washington State. Since so conservative, they don't have weed dispensaries, even though weed is legal in Washington. But it was weird is that the only drug that I was allowed to have was alcohol. And honestly, if I had started on ayahuasca or cannabis or psychedelics a lot earlier, I sometimes think of how much more I could have accomplished type of thing if I hadn't have spent so much time drinking, because drinking is too easy to get down in. It's not that great. I'm looking at a list of websites that you sent me. So could you pronounce that first name for me? Wutai?
Correct. Yeah.
Wutai.
Wu Tai Watcher.
Okay. Okay. Where does that screen name come from? Because there's clearly something connected in there. Did you make that name up? What's that connected to?
Yeah, so I made that name up when I first started writing, which was around the time of my first ayahuasca ceremony,
Oh,
where all of these new experiences moving and then psychedelics kind of just had this entire influx of new information and ideas and ways for me to relate about the world. And it was too much for me to keep in my own mind.
okay.
And so I had to start transcribing some of this in order to just kind of understand my own thoughts and what I was thinking and how
Okay.
my ideas changed over time. And so I started this Telegram writing channel called Wu Tai Watcher, where I was just writing down my thoughts, watching my own thoughts, and I was getting more into meditation and doing more work with the Buddhist side. And so Wu Tai is I believe in Asia somewhere, there's a famous Buddhist mountain called Wu Tai. And so I kind of liked that mountain range for some reason and just kind of rolled with it.
Cool. So you're talking about transcribing your experiences and stuff. Would you consider that sort of a form of public journaling? I mean, is that sort of what it
Oh,
is?
yeah.
Or is it, obviously it's obviously a little more structured than some people's journals are, but some people journal very structured. I know I do. I came up from like a writing background, so I don't really know how to like not write with proper grammar and all that type of thing. I just don't know how to do it. Is that what you were doing? Just sort of journaling in public type of thing?
Yes, I also worked as a technical writer for the government for about 3 years,
Okay.
and so I'm the same way. I learned to write really well. I was
Okay.
AP English, and so I very much write in a professional type
Okay.
manner for
Okay.
a public audience.
So what was that like? I know that, in the early days of like Twitter, like I was very excited about early days of Twitter, of sort of and in blogging, the early, just the start of stream of consciousness blogging and journaling in public. Did you face any like public questioning or backlash or just curiosity from your public journaling? Because I'm sure it was, I mean, it's pretty out there. I mean, it's not for me, but it's pretty out there for most like people who aren't into this type of thing. Did anyone see this stuff and being like, "Yo, Aaron," anyone from like your hometown see it and go, "Yo, dude, what is going on?" Was that ever an issue for you?
Oh yeah, I definitely write. really, I'd say edgy. It's meant to be kind of psychologically jarring, right? So
Okay.
when we go back to my YouTube channel description, I'm trying to basically shift perception and awareness in a way that I think is aligned more towards nature and how I perceive things versus the modern reality. And so my writing can definitely be about ideas or things that are supposed to be a little bit off limits, but it's also to assess how well can I construct my point of view and speak about it to somebody else without them maybe jumping on a counter argument that's just really mainstream or normal, but I want them to sit there and think about something for a minute or be asked a question and think about something that maybe they've never thought about before.
Okay, yeah. So you're trying to plant seeds, trying to give people stuff to think about rather than trying to make an argument, have them refute it, and then back and forth, which is, pretty pointless online
Yes.
anyway.
If
Okay,
I got
so
into an argument, I did something wrong. I
okay,
communicated something wrong if I got to get into a real argument, I
okay,
think.
okay, okay. So tell me a little bit about your initial experiences with ayahuasca. Okay, so this is 2019. Do you remember the month, just for fun?
I think it was May.
It was May
I'd have to
2019.
go back and kind of try to look up the time frames of some of my
I'm
ceremony.
asking because I went in March and April, and then skipped May and June, and then went back in July of that
Uh,
year. So I was wondering if we had seen each other and met up, but clearly not. I'm getting a philosopher vibe from you. I mean, I'm sure probably maybe that's what you wanted to do at first, and then you realize, hey, there's not a whole lot of money in philosophy, as a lot of us did. What was that initial experience like for you? Was it mind expanding? Was it healing? Like, talk about your very first experiences on that very first weekend in 2019.
so the first time going out, I was definitely kind of freaked out about it. I felt the call like I needed to go and experience this just with me going out and moving to the Phoenix area and just trying so many new things and meeting all of these people. It just felt like this tapestry had been woven. And all of these links were just coming together and telling me I should go to do ayahuasca, and I didn't know why.
Wow,
And so the
really?
first time kind of going out there, I was kind of scared about it, and I was just nervous. I'm driving out in the middle of the desert in a state that I haven't lived before. And I went and did it largely also because I wanted to get over alcohol addiction.
Okay,
And then
okay.
also just to bring new awe into my life. I just felt like I was stuck in this closed cycle and I didn't know how to get out of it. And I kept trying to do all these things and nothing would happen. And so I found this ayahuasca community and I thought, this was before it got really popular. So it was kind of underground, I think,
Yeah.
still back in 2019.
Yeah,
It's
no,
not.
yeah, we didn't even advertise on Facebook, I think, until that summer. So, like, yeah, that was new. I mean, it wasn't new for Scott, but it was new for as far as the community goes, for sure.
I remember walking in there and right away when I first got on site, I was like, wow, this is the first time I've gone and met a group of people where they treated me like I was a spirit inhabiting a body. And and that was a really cool sensation because I always felt like going to different spaces that I kind of had to put on a certain mask or interact a certain way. And I felt immediately just going to the Tucson group that I can be me, I can talk about the issues that I'm having, and people are going to accept me and not judge me. And that was really, I'd say, my first time experiencing that. So that alone, was just a pretty profound experience.
Okay, can I ask how old you were in 2019?
I'm 35 now, so I was late 20s,
All right. And so this was your first, and you had been in Arizona for how long before you discovered AYA? A year?
almost a year, I think.
Okay, almost a year. Okay. So this is I mean, that was your sort of your first adventure in your new home a little bit. Does that sort of make sense? Or had you
Yeah,
done other stuff?
Arizona was just a huge new adventure for
Okay.
me. A lot of
Okay.
things weren't working for me in my life, and I was in the same cycles. And so Arizona was just, I'm going to open up my mind and my heart and just try as many things as I can. And somehow I discovered the Tucson group and found my way into the old dome to
Okay.
have ayahuasca.
Many remember the dome. So right after that, what did you start publishing online? How did you work to like journal through that? Did you wait a little bit? Did you sort of take a couple months to be like, what the fuck just happened to me type thing? Or did you immediately start publishing in public somewhere where people could see it?
Well, first, the biggest obstacle I think for me leading up to going to ayahuasca was meeting the 2-week no drinking deadline.
Okay.
And for me, I had never, ever since I first had alcohol, I had never gone 2 weeks before without drinking. And so that alone was just a huge hurdle for me because I
Yeah.
thought it wasn't possible at that
Ah,
time. I'd say I'd kind of between being like a weekend binge drinker and an everyday drinker. At that time, I'd say I had an issue for sure, but I could still function
okay.
for the most part.
Okay.
And I think just the intention of wanting to go for to ayahuasca with the intention of healing and working on my afflictions and some of the addiction allowed me to just have almost like a goal or some level of hope that if I go here and do this and if I can not drink for 2 weeks, then something magical is going to happen. And so just writing and trying to digest that process. I was painting a lot too because
Hey,
I couldn't find the words to speak about a lot of the things that I wanted to discuss. And I could kind of write, but it was messed up. But if I painted and just painted about my dreams or things that were happening, then I could look at the image and then over the course of weeks or months, then begin to write about, well, what does this image mean to me?
cool. Very cool. So did where did you do those images? Just like watercolor or pencil or like, I mean, are you an artist? Are you doing oil paintings? Like, what are you using to draw those?
I had gone to some paint classes in Phoenix. It was just
Smart.
part of a dating type social interaction.
Okay.
And so that was my first time really painting on canvas, and I loved it. And so just went to the store and bought a bunch of canvases and an easel and set it up in my apartment. And I'd wake up in the middle of the night after my dreams or whenever and just start
Okay.
drawing and just paint it.
Okay. Do you still have those paintings? Did you record them and keep track of them, or is that something that have they sort of found their way elsewhere at this
I
point?
think I've got pictures of them on a hard drive over
Okay.
my moves. I
Okay.
threw them out, but one of the first ones, which is the symbol I have on the Wutai Watcher display photo, is of the Philosopher's Stone almost. And so it's me trying to hammer into this rock and get through all of this black tar to find the immortal soul that's hidden under, all of this formed rock, and there's just sparks and stuff flying off. I'm a big mechanic guy and I like playing with fire and hitting things. So the process for me was very much like a blacksmith, just sometimes it was beating the crap out of the stone in order to try to break things free. And sometimes it was a little more subtle, but
Okay. I'm seeing the painting right here. Liking it. I can tell that it's something. This is a much better painting job than I can do. So congratulations on that from me. So you're painting. Did you have any emotional releases as you painted, or was this something that you sort of woke up from the dream and just went and did it and then laid back down? Or was a whole thing? Were you crying? Were you shaking? Were you sweating? Or was it just pure channeling?
no, I'd say early on it was really hard for me to channel the
Okay.
spiritual messages. It
Okay.
was like they wanted to come through and I didn't know how to process it. And I channel a lot of my purging, I'd say, from physical exercise. Less so now, but early on I was heavy into exercise because it was enough to get my mind to slow down enough where the chatter would stop. I definitely had issues with the racing analytical mind that would not shut up, and I couldn't sleep or anything. Insomnia was a huge issue for me. And also the messages and the dreams. So sometimes I did a lot of hill sprints. So I would be in the middle of the night and I couldn't go to sleep. I'd have a lot of thoughts. I would go and run hills over in Scottsdale up the mountains. And then once I was relaxed enough, then I could come back and write. Or it was just a messy process. There was just a lot I was going through and experiencing, and I was trying to move energy. And at that point in time, I just was not equipped to understand what was happening to me or how to move and shift this energy, how to purge things. So it was kind of just flailing. It was me just kind of trying to move, and I didn't know what I was doing, but I'll flail around and hopefully something will kind of land. And writing and painting seemed to be the proper outlets for me to channel some of that creative type energy. And now I do it in a much more healthy way, but back then it was definitely chaos.
And that was basically you teaching yourself. It sounds like you apparently weren't shown or weren't taught or didn't take as a kid. You didn't understand how to healthily cope with this stuff. Is that something did that just come to you? Like you just knew, hey, I'm going to paint. Or was it something that you specifically were going out towards, like, hey, I need to paint, I need to work out. That's how I'm going to deal with the insomnia and not being able to drink type of stuff. Like, was it a decision, or was it sort of something that just popped up?
I was trying a lot of different things, and I think that fitness was a safe way for me to practice things. And I was big into athletics growing up as well. And so nobody really questioned if, oh, Aaron's just always at the gym or he's
Yeah.
out running.
Yeah.
No one would be like, oh, he's going through something. It was like, man, he's really a dedicated athlete and he cares about his body. And in reality, it was, I am so angry and I'm freaking out and there's something going on in my mind that needs to be released. And the only way for me to get that out is by exercising until I basically collapse.
Yeah. I used to do that as well. Long distance running was my version of that. Just you'd run like, oh, you can run 15 miles. I'm like, yeah, it's not because I'm a runner. It's because I have to keep going or I freak out. Talk a little bit about drinking. So you were classified. I mean, I'd say you're a binge drinker. That sounds like a lot of what us go through is, we don't always know how to stop drinking because one feels good and then it shuts your brain up. Through ayahuasca, did ayahuasca tell you to stop drinking? Did ayahuasca tell you why you drank in the first place? Did you have any realizations surrounding that, either in ceremony or out?
Yeah, it was a much longer process than I would have imagined early on. I kind of was hoping that I would go there, be able to take the medicine. It would magically fix things. I would magically have the right answer. Even my first time walking in, I was like, these must be the most spiritual ascended masters gathered in the middle of the desert. I am going to probably, who knows what gifts will be bestowed upon me for discovering this
Right.
holy relic.
Right.
That was really funny because I had that going into it. And I remember having one of my first visions and ayahuasca was like, yeah, you really messed up by coming in here thinking that was going to happen. I am going to teach you a lesson so you do not come in here again with that baggage.
Okay. Okay.
I got beat up. I got beat up pretty bad.
Okay.
And I had to learn, I'd say probably just emotionally, what was the root of me drinking? What was the emotional root all the way back to the beginning? What was I running from? Why was I trying to escape reality?
Did you figure
Why
it
was
out?
I uncomfortable in my own skin?
Did you
And
figure it out?
it took many years. It took battles with not drinking and then going back to drinking. It took changing my life, changing different aspects of my career, changing relationships, moving a few times, getting back out into nature, doing therapy work and going through really group sessions where I could voice and speak about a lot of the challenges I was facing. It wasn't until I found myself in a proper group dynamic and a recovery program before I really did, I think, the deepest level work that I needed to in order to reach my first year without alcohol.
Okay. So it sounds like you would consider yourself an alcoholic. I mean, you can't drink at all ever. Like there's just not, as far as now, like you can't control it. So there's no, hey, I figured out what the root cause was. Now I can have wine when I want to, or I can have a beer when I want to. It's more of, I don't want it at all because there's nothing really positive about it for me. Well,
yeah, I can't.
It's too many
God
negatives
willing,
anyway.
I hope I never drink again.
Okay.
For me, I definitely realized that there is something about the alcohol, whether it's a distilled matter, I don't know what it is, what the elixir concoction is, but for me, it definitely shifts the entire frequency of my thoughts and what feelings and emotions and experiences my entire body receives. And once I have that, then it is like I go to a bit of a different reality and suddenly I have a lot more negative voices and experiences and things that start to creep in on me and my dreams as well. It's no longer a battle I have enough things going on that I need all the energy and positivity and good aids on my side to introduce something that brings out some demons for me just is not the way for me to go.
I get
And
it. I
it
totally
was
get it.
tough for me getting to that point because I didn't want to admit that. I didn't want to have full responsibility over my own self-care, especially psychologically and emotionally. I thought it was too much. I was wondering why me? Why do I have to be responsible for all of this stuff? Why can't I just be a normal person? Why do I have to be different? Why do I have to be taking ayahuasca in the desert and go through therapy and all of this stuff? Now I'm cool with it. But at the time it was just, it was rough. It was really rough.
Now, do you think that one of the reasons that you left New Mexico was probably connected to the root cause of your drinking? Like, did you know that you needed to leave in order to not necessarily heal, but maybe the lifestyle that you were leading or that you learned to lead there just wasn't conducive to you. So you didn't know what you needed, but you knew what you didn't need. Was that connected to that? Was leaving part of that journey? Obviously an earlier part of that journey.
Yeah, I think in familiar type environments, especially where there's a heavy amount of upbringing programming, at that time I don't think I had the strength over my conscious and subconscious. And so it was like in those environments, I could tell my subconscious or some other part of me was running the show. So I would be in a certain situation and it was like I was on autopilot. My emotions
Mm,
would be triggered. I'd have certain thought loops. And eventually I realized I don't have the power to make the changes I need with all of these other forces and pressures that are trying to keep me to be a certain person. I need to remove myself. And that way I can finally just spend enough time to discover who is me and what do I want to do? What are my thoughts and emotions and my reactions?
yeah, that's similar. I've talked to a lot of people like that. Like a lot of us with root cause, like with deep root causes of or injuries, call them. You want to call them complex PTSD. You want to call them mental illness. You want to call whatever, whatever that is, gene something. I don't know, spiritual stuff. It's hard to figure out who we are because there's no one to go back to. We don't ever remember, being super happy and super spiritual because we just knew we were never like that. So did you have something you were trying to go back to? Like, do you remember yourself at like 6 years old and like 6-year-old Aaron had it figured out? Like maybe they liked baseball or they liked rocks or they liked trees or whatever else. I want to go back and do that. Or was it more of I don't even know who I am. I need to figure that out on my own. I need to do that in a safe environment.
I think it was definitely I need to figure out who I
Huh.
am.
Okay.
Looking back as a child, I don't remember having an environment where I was like I can fully be me. Even as a young child, I remember being at school and around all of the kids and other teachers and talking to family or adults and being like, what game is everybody playing here? Like everybody is playing some sort of game and they know the rules. They don't talk about it. I kind
Yeah.
of know the rules, but I'm missing some part of this equation. Can somebody tell me what we're doing here as human beings, why we're alive, and like why you all are playing these weird games? And nobody could kind of give me an answer. And then I realized, oh, you don't ask adults those questions. I need to keep some of my questions to myself because I make adults uncomfortable.
Oh,
And I also
because
had,
they don't know. Yeah. You
yeah,
also
no,
have,
they don't know.
yeah. Yeah.
And I had a lot of hallucinations as a kid, especially when I would get sick. And so
Really?
I'd say I had full on psychedelic trips as a child, especially fever induced hallucinations where
Okay.
I was
Okay.
seeing and hearing things and I would want to know why do I have dreams that other people don't have dreams
Okay.
like this? Why do I see things and have hallucinations when I have a fever? What's going on? And it freaked people out.
Were they scary to you at the time and maybe not now, or were they scared, or were they never scary to you? Did you know what was going on?
I think initially I wasn't afraid of them, but once I started speaking about them, other people projected their fear of them onto me, and then I came to associate fear with them, and then for many years, even leading all the way up until I started drinking heavily, it was I do not want to face my dreams and my visions. Can I just live a normal life and go to work and go to school and sleep and not have a full on, spiritual
Yeah.
battleground in my dreams? It's just too much.
And that's why drinking, I mean, I don't know if this is the correct word. That's why drinking probably appealed to you because it shut all that off, I don't know. Okay. So your first ceremony, you said you got beat up. So you went 2 weeks without drinking for the first time in your alcohol imbibing life. What was that first ceremony like? By beat up, was it physically painful? Was it emotionally painful? Is there anything that stands out from that first weekend that you still remember as like, doesn't have to be painful, but as was really helpful?
I think I'm very much, well, I've got the I'm definitely the Virgo personality where I like to figure everything out, have a good way of getting through things. I'm just able to analyze things. And so I kind of thought going into ayahuasca, I'm a really smart person. I'll be able to analyze all of this, control the experience and I'm in control of it all. And going into that, the biggest thing was me confronting a power and forces that were far, far stronger than
Okay.
my own mental capacities. And
Okay.
so I was shown that in a way that made it undeniable.
Okay. Okay.
I was taken out of space and time and thrown into mental cycles and swirling that made it so I either had to choose to stay in my wheel of samsara for eternity, or I could start listening to what ayahuasca wanted me to do, and then the wheel of samsara would finally stop and I would be able to move into a different experience. So it was kind of showing me the difference between utilizing my mental faculty and then just surrendering to whatever ayahuasca wanted to teach me.
Wow. Now, would you consider yourself at the time, you maybe didn't know the term at the time or didn't really consider it. You're obviously intellectually intelligent. Would you consider yourself emotionally intelligent when you first started ayahuasca? And if not, or even if so, has that improved as you've worked more with medicine and your own integration?
I think in comparison to your average Western person, I'd say I was pretty emotionally intelligent, but in comparison to now, it is completely different. I would say now I did not understand my emotions or the connection to my heart space at all. I was only operating in a mental construct. I would
Hmm.
get emotional feedback, but I would
Hmm.
not integrate those experiences. I would take emotions and I would attach to them. I could be angry for an entire year, or I could be depressed, or I could be heartbroken for extremely long periods of time. Now I I'm emotionally intelligent enough where if I have an experience, have a thought or emotion, I know kind of where it's coming from, how to recognize it, shift it, move it in a relatively quick manner so I don't have any issue with extreme emotions sticking around for extended periods of time.
Right. I think that's what we're all going for sure. Your first experience, how long did you give yourself to integrate? And what if anything, did you change before your second sit in ceremony?
I've realized one of the issues with my ceremonies was struggling to remember things
Hmm.
pretty early on. And so that was a big thing for me because my first few ceremonies were just hard to remember in a lot of detail. I felt like I was just going through this roller coaster. And by the time I was kind of finished, I fell back kind of down and then I was struggling to remember what had even happened. It was like I had huge chunks of amnesia over my experience. I knew something profound happened, but I couldn't recall it. And I knew that
Okay.
was something I think I needed to address. And I think that was primarily just due to my lifestyle and different choices
Okay. Okay.
in my prep work.
Now, I think I've read a couple places and I sort of experienced this, that a lot of times during ceremony, when we don't remember parts of it, it's either highly traumatic or we're working in dimensions and working with energy that we don't have a frame of reference for as a 3D existing human being. And so we can't remember, sort of like how we can't think of a new color because we don't have the ability to do that. Did you ever think like maybe your consciousness was working in a dimension that our human monkey brains don't have access to, or was that something that I don't know? Was that ever something you considered?
That came later on where
Mm,
I kind of made that
mm.
realization. Early on, I was just really jarred and just I couldn't comprehend what was happening. So I like to say I started smelling colors and tasting shapes. All of my sensory orientation was gone. And so now I had to realize, what am I experiencing if I take away that normally I use my eyes to see colors? What happens when I start to have all of these other areas of perception or emotions that I've never activated before? What happens when those come online? How do I even comprehend those different relationships? And so I think my early ayahuasca experiences were really intense. I was pretty into a variety of spiritual practices and meditation, and in that direction already. I feel like I had already done a substantial amount of work leading up to that. Granted, it's nothing in comparison to where I think I'm at today. But at that point, I thought I've done so much work. I'm more prepared than anyone coming into,
Okay.
ayahuasca.
Okay. Okay. Now, your integration process, at least in the beginning, what did it look like? Was it a scheduled day? Was it journaling? Was it a promise that whenever you felt the emotion that started to overwhelm you, you'd sit down? Like, what was that? What did you initially start doing before you knew what you knew now? What did you do to integrate the whatever you were getting from ceremonies or after ceremony?
I think I fell back to what I was used to. So I went back to just working out. I think some level of isolation, and I didn't know how to move or integrate or really what I was supposed to do. And I think I would have really benefited if I had known, hey, there's a period of integration that you go through. There were actually calls. I looked it up. I think your first integration call with the Tucson group was like literally the month after I went to ceremony. So the opportunity was there, but I didn't know to ask. And that's been a reoccurring theme for me is I can be somewhere and literally my backyard, the resource that I need, the person that I need, the community, it could be right there. But if I'm not looking for it and I have no idea what I'm looking for, I'll never find it. And so I think that was my integration process as well. I didn't do a good job with it. I should have leaned more on community and asked for support. I didn't know.
You did the best you could and you didn't hurt yourself any further. So I would say that's a success, but I get what you're talking about. So do you think if, if someone came to you right now, if Aaron came to you, late 20s and like, hey, Aaron, I'm a version of you. Would you tell them to get an integration coach? Would you tell them specific things? Like, is there anything that you would say to someone who may go through something similar to what you did as far as helping integration the first time? Like, what would you give them?
I think group dynamics are really magical. And so I think the divine is able to orchestrate moving people, plants, animals, different circumstances in a group environment better than maybe a one-on-one as far as
Okay.
this type of healing work.
Okay.
From my personal experience in the recovery groups, it was far easier for me in a group dynamic than it was one-on-one. And,
Okay.
and so I think leaning on a group to talk about different things, it allowed other people that I would have never had conversations with be able to bring something into the conversation, and it ripped apart a lot of my stereotypes where normally I think I would be like, oh, well, this person is, this category. I'm not going to get along with them. They don't know what
Yeah.
I'm going through.
Okay.
But in the group dynamic, I was told to shut up and listen. And then so it made me have to be present and listen to somebody else's story who I may not have ever aligned with. And then all of a sudden realize, wow, I have a lot more in common with that person than I would have ever imagined. And then that kept happening over and over. And then I'd make friends with somebody that was like, wow, I never normally have made friends with that person, but I've been missing out on a connection by limiting myself to my own stereotypes and what groups I'm interacting with. So for me, it's all about find a group dynamic and just show up and try to be authentic and see what connections start forming. Usually there's always one person in any group that makes the whole meeting, worth it. I might not be best friends with everyone. Something amazing might not happen, but I may have one conversation with one person that completely changes me or their lives. And that's what I love about group dynamics. It's just so magical, and the synchronicities can be beyond mathematical possibilities.
Oh, that's really cool. Yeah, I know that even in ceremony, when people are going through hard times or whatever else, and my part of my brain is frustrated, they're being, they're purging or moving or whatever else. And then I realize the next morning it was teaching me something. And you're like, oh my God, that didn't make any sense to me at the time. And my brain, my conditioning wanted me to leave or tell them to be quiet or whatever else. But there's my higher self was like, there's something you need to learn from them. So it sounds like you're doing exactly that. So you have your first ceremony. You go through integration the best way you know how. What prompted you to come back? You had a rough first one. What made you want to come back?
I'd say the one thing, no matter what happens in the ceremony, if it goes really well or if it goes really bad, there's a level of catharsis that only I think the ceremony environment offers. And so it's just enough for me to be able to take a rest. And so normally I'd say some part of my spirit or psychological aspect would always be like the hamster running the wheel. And then
Mm-hmm.
I go to ceremony, and then it's just enough to take me off the wheel and, give me a little water and a
Mm-hmm.
little oxygen, and then I can
Mm-hmm.
perceive things differently. And then I'm
Yep.
jumping back on the wheel, but,
Yep.
just that break is enough time for me to analyze things in a way that I've never done before. And so I think that's been a reoccurring theme for me is if things are getting too bad for me and I'm struggling in the normal world, there's nothing that is so bad happening that I can't go and take a break and have a little release from it by just going to ceremony into a space where I can leave all of that behind. So that's been a big reason I've come back, is it just gives me a psychological break and spiritual break that I can't get anywhere else.
Okay. So let's compare your first integration experience, first couple months, to your last one. So the one that happened this December, and I'm assuming you haven't sat since December, have you? Or have you?
No, I haven't.
Okay. So are you doing anything differently, or are you just better at accepting and moving through whatever comes up?
I'd say I've transitioned to where before I'd have more of it was like I'd go to have a psychological vision and it was more like going to vacation.
Hmm.
Now I'd say I've more lived the psychedelic experience on a regular basis. And that was a challenge for me to transition to also, because I wanted to kind of play both sides of the fence and kind of be like, well, I just kind of recreationally every once in a while go out to the desert, but I keep it in this neat little box and I don't
Yeah.
let it bleed out anywhere else. Where now I'm like, I've kind of embraced that this is a big part of who I am and my overall experience. I love the people. I love the stories and the connections and everything that are creating. I can't get it anywhere else. And so I want to invest more into the community. And I take more of the signals, I think, from the divine at any point in the day. And I think I'm just more open-minded and open-hearted to be like, well, if I think I'm getting a signal kind of this way, then I'll just roll with it. All I've got is the present moment anyways. And it's not like I can predict where I'm going to be at next year. So I just roll with it and just kind of feel like I'm living the psychedelic experience on a regular basis.
That's
I think
pretty.
that in some ways now I'd say that some of my psychedelic experiences were preparing me for the big trip, which was life.
Yep. Yeah. I think I hope that's preparing us all for that, but who knows? Whatever goes on. So have you ever gone the conventional route for mental health? Have you gone to, I mean, maybe even before ayahuasca, did you ever go to a psychologist or psychiatrist or therapist, or did you try any sort of like Western focused therapy options?
No, I had felt out some conversations trying to get some advice from people I'd say that are more on the traditional route. I got a really bad feeling about it. They couldn't handle some of my smaller questions, and I quickly was afraid that if I am honest about what I am thinking and experiencing, especially my dreams, my visions, and some more edgy things, then I'm probably going to get institutionalized. So I never wanted to go that route.
Do you have any examples that you feel comfortable sharing, like even a small one that you were worried that if you shared, they would take you away? Is there anything that you'd share?
So I have a lot of reoccurring dreams, and so these would be dreams where I fall into the same scenario, and then it seems like I can't get out of it.
Okay.
And then I can go and do things in my physical waking life, and it transforms the levels in the dream. So there's sometimes things that happen in my dreams that are calling me to act in the physical world. If I go and figure out what that is, then I can go to the next level of my dream where I learn new things. So I kind of hear voices and spirits, in my
Okay.
dreams, and
Yeah.
I communicate with them, I'd
Okay.
say, in
Okay. Yeah.
some way. And I was really afraid to talk about all of the things that I experience in my own head and in my dreaming world.
Oh, wow. That's fascinating. I know that I first went to a psychologist when I was in my early 20s because I wasn't doing well. And I told them, I was honest with them. I did what you didn't. And I told them that I was at a party, at a frat party, and I saw black spirits coming out of people, like demons, which is a pretty normal thing in the spiritual world to see spirits coming out of people, especially when you're
Mhm.
drinking, because that's the whole reason spirits, because our soul leaves us and then the darkness, demons, whatever you want to call it, get in. And they almost diagnosed me schizophrenic, and they did diagnose me bipolar. And I will tell you that it did not help at all. So congratulations on having the foresight to not go that route, because it was there's nothing wrong with Western medicine for a lot of things. I just don't think Western psychology and psychiatry is old enough and studied enough to really understand what is happening. So I don't want to not saying therapy is bad, but some of the times that the diagnosis can be really really limiting.
And
So
that's kind of also
yeah,
the same description working with more of the recovery groups. They say that a lot of the addictive people, they've got three doors, which is either institutionalization, death, or prison. And so I also did not want to go the traditional route because I felt that if I went that way, one of those three possibilities was likely going to happen for me. And I was really afraid I wasn't going to make it through the Western medicine cycle if I went there.
and you knew that something you weren't. I mean, let's just say you weren't normal. You weren't. I don't mean normal as like you were bad. You weren't acting like most people do, but you knew something. But you knew that you weren't wrong either, right? Like you had some sort of semblance. Like what's happening to me may not be explainable, but it's not demonic, or it's not like
Right.
some sort of artificial thing that's happening to you, and you are you're in enough control of yourself, right?
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. I I think early on, even from when I was a kid, there were things that I understood and knew. I just knew that was the right way to do things and the right way to handle things. But I would get so much pressure from adults and authoritative figures that they would basically tell me, you're just a stupid little kid. You don't know. You don't have any experience. And so you just need to shut up and be quiet. And so me relying on, all of those adults in the adult community for my own survival while I submitted and said, well, maybe they're right. I'm just a young kid. I
Of
need
course.
them to survive. I better just be quiet. And so, but I was also really angry about that. I was like, I know I'm right. You guys won't even answer my basic questions. I know that you're just using this because you're probably afraid and you don't want to talk about these things. So I use anger as a motivator. And so I said, well, I'm going to get straight A's. I'm going to get a great job. I'm going to blow past all of you and do everything that I'm supposed to. But
Mm-hmm.
that way, when I get to that point, I can tell you guys, hey, I've done everything you told me to. How about those questions? I definitely have that kind of personality. I'll bury some stuff, but when you see me again, I'm going to have all of my tools out, and you
Yeah.
better be ready because I
Did
don't do
you
that as much now, but back then I was definitely that way.
So you did actually go back and do some of that. I mean, I know that the urge, a lot of us want to do it far more, but you did actually go back to some of the adults and being like, hey, this thing that happened when I was whatever. Did you actually go back and say to adults when this thing that happened when I was 8 or 9 was, I know what that is now and you don't. Like, what the hell? Did you ever go back and do that? Or was that more of a thought experiment?
Well, pre-ayahuasca and a long time ago, I was definitely more of a confrontational person, and I definitely had no shortage of confrontations with a variety of different people, and a lot of that was out of anger and me attacking people that didn't really know any better themselves. I had a lot of outbursts, I'd say, aimed at people that didn't really deserve it. And it took me a while to realize that my certain ideas and my experiences are suited for a certain environment and a
Okay.
certain group of people that have the
Okay.
right capacity to handle it. And so as I've limited, that in a healthy manner, I have much more beneficial relationships and interactions with people.
Okay, I do have something that's a little off topic, but behind you there is a tapestry on the wall or something. Could you talk more about that? Because I'm staring at it, that bunch of symbols in there, and I'm trying to figure out what it is because it keeps sucking me in. Is there significance to that? To that thing? To the rug you have in the background? Tapestry in the background?
Yeah, so well, I'd say it goes kind of back to me wanting to go and explore a lot of different things, and that way I could come back and say I have all of the experience. You can't pull the little kid, you aren't experienced card on me. And I've taken that to heart way more than I probably needed to
Okay,
in
got
all
it.
arenas. But
Got it.
so I had I had gone to explore some various communities that are kind of off grid. And I
Okay.
think that there's a lot of like underground mystery schools and cults than just people doing really cool stuff that you'd
Yeah.
never hear about
Yeah.
out in the middle of nowhere. And so I've tried to seek out and find a lot of these different groups and communities, a lot of them very controversial, just to meet the people and interact with them. And so I've done some more pagan. I found some pagan groups that was basically like a heavy metal rock band that they did bare knuckle boxing fights at the middle of a rock concert and were really into the ruins and pagan things. And they had like a biker club. So I hung out with some of those guys and studied the ruins. And that was kind of part of one of my many journeys into
Wow.
the fringes of the, you know, frontiers of some really weird groups out there. But there's some amazing, incredible people that nobody have ever heard of, just doing cool stuff out in the middle of nowhere is
Yeah,
what I've discovered.
have you noticed that no matter how weird or how isolated those groups are, there's still a bunch of kernels of truth in what they're doing. Like their whole
Mhm.
their entire process may not be scalable. Like we may not all be able to live that way, and we may not all be able to act that way or believe in that. But there's a lot of truth in what they're talking about. Is there anything that really stood out for you that you never thought? I mean, did some group tell you, hey, red's actually green? Or is there any tidbits or insights that you got that you never would have expected either from them or you never would have expected just based on your logical understanding of the world?
That's happened so many times to me. For me, I think a big thing for me, a reoccurring theme is how can I burn my illusions away with the reality of the lived experience? And that
Okay.
just anytime I go and try to do something that's new, or I had some certain stereotypes of what these people were like, and I just immerse myself openly in the environment, I'm constantly burned with the fire of truth and just the reality of what the experience was like. A big one for me was getting into the homeschooling type communities, multi-generational homeschooling, and interacting with some of the children there versus the children I was accustomed to
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
with public schools and very traditional authoritative type routes. And just seeing the difference in the children and the adults and level of communication, their awareness, how their energy manifests, the focus
Interesting.
of their eyes, the clarity of everything. It was so different than I I would have expected. That it was really hard for me to experience it. Actually, I'd say it was so much of a change that I felt like I was robbed of my own childhood by not getting a chance to have a similar experience. Sometimes
Oh,
I'd say that's not now, but in the past, I felt like I was cheated when I'd go and visit some of these places, and I was like, "You mean people are living like this, and I've lived a completely different way in torture. I didn't know this existed."
yeah,
And it would make me upset almost,
I bet.
at some level. Now I'm like, man, it's so incredible that people had the courage to go out and say, forget what society's doing. I'm going to go out and do my completely own thing, go my own direction, and I'll make it work. And I'll find people who will support me and grow a family that way. And now I'm
That's
like,
cool.
man, that's a level of courage that I didn't know people had, but it is so amazing to see when people are just their authentic selves and say, forget the system. I'm going to go build whatever I want or die trying.
Or
I
need to,
love
or
those
yeah,
people.
that's cool. Yeah, I never really thought about that way about homeschooling as a multi-generational operation because it really has to be to work. Because you can't just take one family and isolate them on a farm in the middle of, well, I mean you can, but I mean one family, mom, dad, kids in the middle of a farm and maybe a couple of other families. You need the grandparents and the great grandparents. You need to have all those things in place for that to work really well. So if, it sounds like that's what you found. I know that I went to public school as well, and we always saw the homeschool kids as weird.
Yeah,
But I think we only saw the failed homeschool communities, the ones that were torn apart by money or health reasons or governmental reasons or whatever else. We never saw the successful ones because they never needed to come. They never needed to come back. They were fine.
exactly.
Yeah, that's cool. Okay, so I have on your Substack here, I'm seeing some fascinating stuff. You make a mention about digital adoption in our modern particle accelerator has given individuals the access and power to new levels of reflection and refraction never experienced before in history. Talk to me like have no idea what you're talking about. What do you mean by that?
Man, that's a good
All
one. I'm
excited.
trying to settle in for how long of an answer I want to have on this.
It's okay. Just pretend. Just say I am interested in psychedelics. I've never sat before, so if you get too deep into it, I'm gonna like, what the hell? So yeah. So if you can keep it at a basic level, and we'll go deep into it later.
So trying to make it super simple, if I'm a person at, let's say it's Halloween time
Uh-huh.
and I'm
Uh-huh.
rocking my ninja mask. And so I'm navigating around the world and I want to hang out with other ninjas and I'm sitting there holding my ninja mask. And then I come around a group and these other guys all have their ninja masks. And then so we can just pretend that we're all reflecting that we're ninjas for
Yep.
Halloween. And maybe we
Okay.
can go and do ninja moves that we've never done before, but it's a fun experience to be around other ninjas who want to do ninja things. I would not have a lot of fun if I went into a group dressed as a ninja and it's a bunch of people dressed as princesses and they
Okay.
want to have tea.
Yeah.
So there's not appropriate reflection with the people um, in appearance and
Okay.
in activity.
Okay.
And then that's the super simple childish version. But as we grow and we become adults, then we take on different hobbies. And so, like, I grew up racing motorcycles. And so I love racing motorcycles. And so I'd seek out friends that offered me a reflection of a shared passion in racing motorcycles and surround myself with that experience. But it's also an isolated bubble. Like, if I just have motorcycle friends, I'm only going to be around motorcycle things and it's going to shape my language, the people I interact with, my relationships, probably future wife, everything is conformed based on that. Well, digital technology has allowed it. So whatever my smallest level of nuance, hobby, and thing that I love, I can find a group of other people that also take that as their number one passion in the world. And I can just bounce around. And I'm somebody who I'm definitely more of an adrenaline junkie, a thrill seeker. And so I do tend to jump around from different hobbies. And so I'll get super into like blacksmithing. And then I may do it for a year or two and maybe hang around with a bunch of blacksmiths. Like I did that I found basically hung out with the Amish guys, learning blacksmithing to see what their lifestyle is like. Well, that provides a whole different level of reflection and refraction from a community that is completely different from me. And then it allows me to be in an environment where I can see, well, what are the similarities that still remain in this human being, even though we have completely different lived experiences? And that
Cool.
helps me kind of try to fine tune what is the frequency or what is the substance of the human soul that remains constant, even amongst billions of individual people that are unique and down to the finest level, but somehow there's something that remains consistent. So that's kind of a little bit of my
I
my
like it.
passion is like,
I
was
like
that
it.
even possible that we can have basically same models of mind and spirit and emotion?
Is there any group that you have met through, let's say, digital means that you never would have, there's no chance you would have met them if you'd not had access to the internet? All right, let's just say. Is there any group that, or if there's multiple groups, is there anyone that's been the most impactful? I don't mean the most your favorite or the best or the most thriving or whatever else. Is there anyone that stood out or anything that stood out from the disparate groups that you've sat with, known, understood?
Man, I've really been fortunate to meet a lot of extraordinary people and in extraordinary groups at a level that makes it almost like it's one of my magical gifts. They all are really special. I'd say recently I just moved back to New Mexico from the Appalachian Mountains and I connected with a group of people in some recovery groups in this old, small mountain town in Georgia. And they were just the coolest old people that would just meet at this random place in a small town on Thursday and they'd make coffee, out of spring water they found in the living spring, next door. And they were just old timers that were just honest and authentic and had lived these insane lives and almost died multiple times. But then they, were happy old men and they just had this different level of wisdom that they were able to offer that I hadn't experienced from elders, like in a really loving tribal elder
Yeah.
type environment.
Yeah.
Most of my older mentors, I'd say, were more business side. So they were very hustle, old, I just grind, not really the type that's preparing for the next transition and really integrating all of their life experiences.
So you've been around and done all this stuff, and one of the most impactful groups on you was a couple of guys who drink coffee and talk in the mountains of Appalachia. That's pretty much it. Yeah, that's fascinating. Like I totally get that. You think it's going to be some complex, amazing thing that you have to hike to the tallest mountain or whatever else, and it turns out there's wisdom and power in everywhere as long as you're looking for it. On your Substack, do you have a goal for your Substack? Or is that just a place where you're sharing stuff? So I'm looking right now at the plant medicine distillation cycle. It is the plant medicine distillation cycle, and I know it's not a bong, but it sort of looks like it. What brought that up? Do you know what I'm talking about? The higher self cloud? Like,
yeah, that's one of my
what's that about?
Strongest ayahuasca visions that I've had. And this was while I was working with Ojo Sacha, and definitely tend to get into what I would call a more mystical level of experience with psychedelics. Going in early, I didn't think that was the case, but my visions tend to be a lot closer to what I would describe as mystical visions from people that I've read about in the past. And so this one was me going through the distillation process. That ceremony, I was at a really tough point in my life. I had to make a lot of changes that I didn't want to, and it really felt like I was going to die. So going to ceremony, I had the intention that I wanted to just, part of me needed to die so the new part of me could move on. I lost all sense of normal consciousness, and I definitely felt like my consciousness went into a different dimension where I became part of the world soul's cleaning process of consciousness. And so this was me involved in the distillation of human spirit as it moves through the different stages, and also through the different stages related to nature. And so a lot of my meditations are, how can I determine what is happening with my inner world with something that is going on in the outer world, so I can establish some sort of orientation of what is happening. So the solid stage would be like, hey, I go to work every day. I have the same friends. Every weekend I do the exact same thing. I don't read any new books. I watch the same show. I'm in a solidified cycle. Nothing in my life is shifting or changing. And then as we get more energy moving, we move into more of like a liquid stage where all of a sudden now maybe we have got new friends or new hobbies, and we're starting to explore maybe different religions or philosophies. All of a sudden there's new energy and ideas and feedback going on. And so that solidified state shifts to becoming fluid and liquid. And then one of the things I realized in ceremony is the more I seem to interact with the outer world and make connections with other people, and I'm in service to what I would say would be more of the divine mission for healing and reducing suffering and helping people to escape from their psychological prisons and live more presently in their heart. That requires being open-minded and trying new things, so that way the divine can kind of move things into your life. If I want to have a relationship with somebody, but I never leave my house, I'm never going to meet anyone new. So the liquid stage was me
shifting.
Yeah, shifting to become more present and just being open that I don't maybe know what's going to happen next year or tomorrow, but I can be present today and just be fluid to embrace whatever challenges come in my life. If I lose my job, then I'll roll with the flow of it. If I've got to move somewhere else, it could be a new opportunity that the divine is orchestrating things that are far beyond my own comprehension.
Okay.
And so that created a lot of pressures, going through those kind of new experiences, because now I thought I was this identity. I have these new experiences that confront my illusions. Now it's burned away. Well, who am I at the other end of that? And so in the plant medicine distillation cycle, it's me on my journey from being solid, going to become liquid, and then discovering that even the liquid has limitations. And we can actually build pressure and kind of create things and create almost new experiences that I've had where I'm like, did that exist before and I never found it? Or did did the divine just start to weave that into my dimension of the reality and I'm experiencing it? I've had some synchronicities that feel that way, where it's just so many things have happened that it feels like I stepped into a different layer of reality. And one of the challenges in ceremony was, how do I move my spirit or my awareness out of my body? How do I get out of just the normal experience? Well, I had this cap that I would hit, which I called the casino arcade or the mind
Casino.
gate. And I talked to other people in ceremony, and they also had the same experience, was where they hit kind of that samsara wheel, and they would get stuck outside of space or time, and they'd start seeing cartoon figures, and it's just like a sensory overload.
Yeah.
And for me,
Yeah.
it felt like my mind was broken. It was like it's got more energy than what it can handle. My mind has got sparks blowing off of it, overheating. It's like, okay, this is too much. Well, how do I get beyond a barrier that's not meant to be crossed? And so that's kind of how I felt like the transition between more of an individual and collective consciousness level is, compared to a cosmic consciousness. And so the mind gate is, well, now I'm not just integrating my own individual experiences, I'm integrating the ancestral trauma from generations or patterns that exist in my culture, in my society, beyond my individual lifetime. Now I need to explore the polarities between that level of forces.
So I'm looking at the lightning bolts, right? And so my brain wants to see this as a loop. So my brain wants to okay, there's something heating up the bottle, okay, which your spark, your whatever else, that's helping you change your mind from states of matter, from solid to liquid to gas. And then that seeds the clouds, or your higher self, whatever you want to call that. And then the water from that purges the toxins in your body, and then it starts anew. Is that sort of what this is? Or
Yeah.
is my brain trying to see a loop that's actually a duality thing where they're happening both at the same time, or it's a loop?
You're spot on.
Okay.
So I'm
Okay.
also trying to communicate, visions that are far beyond words into a format that is going to be digestible for whoever looks at it. So there's also a layer of symbolism there. I didn't even explain it. You could just look at the image and you should be able to draw conclusions of what that cycle is and what it means to you. And so you described it perfectly, it is a cycle. It's the cycle of just like how we go through the ayahuasca trip, where it's not hitting us that much, and then all of a sudden it starts coming up, and we hit that peak experience, and then we start coming back down. So that's the same thing with like the distillation. Like, we're kind of solid, things start heating up, things get exciting in our life, we try new things, we got the synchronicities sparking. We're like, people come into our lives or bliss or experience, and we're like, I don't know how this was even possible. This is so much. And I remember feeling that flow state, like, even if I'm just climbing a mountain, or skydiving or doing something intense, reaching that flow state is a different consciousness dimension, it feels like.
Okay, so that's what that is. Okay, that's cool.
And so that's
cool.
kind of also what it feels like on the trip for me too, is if I can break free into more of that cosmic consciousness space, it is like, it's kind of like Remo Cosby, the tallest tree in the forest. All of a sudden, things look a lot different when you're up there at the top of the tree. Higher.
Because obviously this is, like you said, you're trying to represent something that makes sense in spiritual, emotional, energetic terms, but doesn't make sense in our 3D reality. And so that's why my brain's trying to see it that way. But that's pretty fantastic. I remember what it's like to be in ceremony and feel like gas, like you've gone up, you're expanded, you're connected to everything, but then eventually you have to come back down, because we are, as much as we may fight it, we are still, spiritual beings having a human existence. We are still humans. Like, our body exists, and it's going to exist for as long as it can, and we try to take care of it as best we can. So that is fantastic. I am definitely keeping that and sharing that with people. So thank you. Your YouTube channel, it feels like you have a lot of similar type things there. What's the impetus behind that? Is that just you needing to get yourself out? You need to talk to something, mostly talking to yourself type thing, even though you're speaking?
Yeah. So what I realized, I definitely enjoy trying to shift people's thinking and perception a little bit. And I like when people change their mind and then they go and run with it and just their lives become magical and all of these great things happen to them. But I realized also in my ability to effectively communicate with other people, I was limited by their own imagination and memory. And that took me a while where I realized the imagination is just like any other muscle. Like if I want to go to the gym and I want to lift heavy weights with this guy, he's got to be at a certain level first. And if he hasn't put in the work, we can't lift together, you know? And so it's kind of like that with imagination and the spiritual and esoteric topics. It's like if the person is not quite there with the freedom of their own imagination to explore some stuff that is way, way out there, well, they have to put in a little imagination training. And so a lot of my exercises are, well, what can I do to start training my own imagination to establish connections beyond where my normal neural pathways kind of run? And also, once we start opening our imagination up, how do I keep that grounded and have any sense of orientation? And so that's why I have them all rooted in nature with season cycles or different experiences animals might go through or plants, because without the grounding in nature, I think the imagination can come up with infinite rationale to support any conclusion. And that's kind of like the mind gate for me too. It's like we can get into spaces where the mental parameters of the brain are they're maxed out. And we can't logically think our way through it. And so we need to move into a different organ of perception, whether that be imagination or memory or the heart or the gut. You know, we've got so many different subtle faculties of perception, and it seems like in the West in America, I was just trained to use my mind, and that was it.
Yeah, that's for sure. You know, where did you get the images from some of these? Did you create them? Were they generated? Did you just were searching?
These are my
and
own
you found them?
visions.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's me working with AI art tools and Photoshop to kind of put together more or less my visions that I have. A lot of those come to me on nature walks. I love doing hiking and nature activities. And so once I open myself up and allow my imagination in nature, all of a sudden I start receiving different ideas and thoughts. And so then I communicate them on videos, and then I listen to them later on before ceremony to try to unpack what were the peak of my ideas over the last 2 years in video format. What happens if I listen to those, every night for a month before ceremony? And then what kind of work can I unpack, with that level of self-programming if I've stuck to my dieta and working with a master plant and I've made a lot of life changes. And when I do things like that, some crazy and wild things start happening in ceremony. And so I think that is a big intention in my video. If people are like, man, I went to ayahuasca and I just didn't get what I was thinking I would out of it, or I didn't have the vision experiences. And it's like, well, have you tried imagination, memory exercises, some of the tools and resources on my channel? Focus on your dieta, make some changes in your life, and you are going to have some wild visions, far more intense probably than anything that you would have asked for. I've had visions more intense than anything I would have asked for.
Oh, yeah, I totally see the same. Yeah, so it looks, that's cool, because it sounds like you're doing, I mean, I think we both know, and this is said over and over, and sometimes people get stuck in it, is that the work for ayahuasca ceremonies actually happens before and after the ceremony. The ceremony itself is more of a diagnosis tool. And that's actually exactly what the Douglas Tangoa, I was in Peru for the first time in September. He told me that. He goes, ayahuasca is basically a diagnosis tool for us. It's not supposed to fix anything. It might help you get rid of blocks, but it's not going to actually cure you. It's the work you do before and the work you do after that's actually going to cure you, whatever, change whatever else. So it sounds like you're taking all of your downloads, your integration stuff, and sort of distilling, maybe not distilling it, but sort of combining it into like a study guide a little bit for each ceremony. Okay.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely take a very ritualistic practice with it. Again, maybe the Virgo type element, or, just my personality. I like to organize and structure everything and make it as perfect as possible. And so that's kind of me perfecting the system for me to have the smoothest ayahuasca and integration experience that I can, based on trial and error.
Now, how do you integrate, how do you use the lessons that you learn from the mystic spiritual world in your everyday life? Is it as simple as eating slower? enjoying the food that, being in the moment, staying in the now and enjoying the food? Or is it as complex as having like a ritualistic type of bedtime routine or a weekend routine? Is there anything that stands out for you that learned from an ayahuasca ceremony, integrated in your life that now is like a daily part of it? That doesn't take a whole lot of effort now. Like it's a pretty quick thing because you sort of did a good job of making it a habit type thing.
I think in the last couple years, the biggest one for me has just been daily prayer routines.
Okay.
And also creating my own prayers. And so
Mm.
I think of prayers, meditation, and mantras as contemplative tools. And so these are tools that we're able to utilize to communicate our higher self with our kind of more conscious, aware self that we navigate with every day. And so we're interacting with kind of like that communication exchange. And so just having a good prayer, mantra, and meditation daily routine has been so important for my psychological health that I think I've downplayed it for a long time. I was like, you really think a couple minutes of a couple lines of prayer every day is really going to help you? And I'm like, yeah,
Yeah.
it works. It really
Yeah.
does. Especially if you do it every day and you start to develop a daily routine around a spiritual practice, that's moving into the lived psychedelic experience.
Yep.
My waking day is my psychedelic experience. And so every day I'm integrating that experience, and every day I'm doing the prep work to prepare for that ritual ceremony. And so that's kind of the level of dedication I think I've got it at now. Of course, I'm, far from perfect and I'm still learning. And my last ayahuasca was very strong on the transition from the age of Pisces into Aquarius and moving from the mind into the heart. And I created that video also to remember what my experience was like. And then I also have songs that I used at that time. So I tend to try to get into a meditative state with the same music, listen to my videos, look at my paintings, read my writing, and it allows me to almost transport, back into that space and re-experience it. And right now, a lot of my service work is focused on grieving and the heart. And my visions tend to echo like, a year back and a year forward almost. And so I'm really focusing in my daily interactions. People are going through a lot of changes. Their minds are at full capacity or full firing. They're broken. They're trying to rationalize something that can't be rationalized. And so they're going to struggle through that, and just to be loving and patient with them as they work through that process. And for me to just try to stay in the heart space and be present and communicate through my voice or my emotions in a more loving manner to make them feel comfortable in the space and work through their own purge, because people are very much purging every day with their anger or maybe their road rage, or they lash out at someone or they cry. Those are all forms of purging we see in ceremony. People can suppress them in daily life, but they're purging. But most adults are grown-up little kids purging through tough emotional challenges as they navigate their daily psychedelic trip, and nobody knows why we're here, and we're just trying to all do the best we can, and it is freaking rough, and it's messy, but it's also beautiful and loving at the same time.
Very cool. So your Telegram, is that sort of a combination of your Substack and the YouTube? Is that a different... I mean, that's obviously its own channel, but is there a different approach with Telegram, or is that more of the group dynamic that you were talking about?
Early on in Telegram, I was trying to comment on, I'd say, different big events or different big influences in the world and try to look at it in a completely different way.
Gotcha.
And so early on, my writing was focused a lot on that before I really had the courage, I think, to give voice to it. It was really hard for me early on to go on camera and speak about something that I had never talked about before, that I was barely trying to process for the first time ever, and try to talk about it in front of a bunch of people. It freaked me out. I was nervous. And so writing was the early way. And eventually I worked up to sending myself voice memos and trying to explain my own ayahuasca visions or how I thought about different spiritual concepts, or just talk about my day. And then that transitioned to videos and presentations and doing some more podcasts. And I like the roundtable type discussions.
Okay. Very cool. You have a couple other interviews on here Is there anything we should know about them? You have one with Bush Whisperer, which is the round table you were talking about. I guess that's an actual round table. That's the King Arthur's round table right there in the back. There's also an interview with the holistic nurse. Is there anything that we should, anything particular that stands out from these, or are they just more of you sharing your thoughts on the intersection of 3D and 4D and 5D and whatever dimensions that we're going?
That was me just meeting some cool people, and I happened to be in their circle and spent some time hanging out with them. And so we sat down for some chats. The one interview with the Bush Whisperer was a really cool guy that I ran across, and he's a practicing shaman in Cape Town, South Africa. And he just has an incredible story. Really taught me a lot as far as the Vedic side of things, which was a great influence. And he's got, I don't know, 30 plus years of occult and shaman experience. But it's just fun to meet these incredible people that I would have never ran into if I hadn't been open-minded and open-hearted enough to reach out and interact with them. And I just meet cool people and learn from them. And if they want to have a conversation, I'm always interested on jumping on a private or public phone call or video call and hashing out some different ideas and collaborating on projects. I definitely enjoy using my business and analytical mind to help people, I think, that are doing good spirit and good heart work out in the collective. And I try to do what I can to help them as much as I can.
Okay, cool. Is there anything I have not asked you that we have not touched on that you really want to talk about? Anything that ayahuasca, any sort of integration type tools? I mean, I guess I could ask you, you said, I'll let you think about the question a little bit, but you said that you don't know where you're going to be in a year, or you can't predict. All right. Not that you don't know, but you probably have an idea, but you can't predict. It sounds like you mentioned possibly a partner or wife. You seem to be very interested in, all this shamanic stuff. Do you see yourself, I don't want to say settling down, but if you have like a family, it's having a center is seems to be more helpful? Or is your goal to sort of keep on doing what you're doing and keep on visiting all these new groups? Or do you want to sort of set up a community, a home base where you can do that and people can come to you? Like, have you had any thoughts about that?
Yeah, that's definitely been a struggle. And I think that's probably a challenge for me just getting into the ayahuasca community early on. It's like, do I go be who I was before, or do I go become a shaman in South America and live in the jungle, right? It's like, how do I battle those two extremes? Because I definitely felt the pull where I'm like, I should just quit everything and just head to the Amazon and just see what happens.
Yeah.
I really enjoy, as much as I would like to do something like that, I think I've had enough feedback now over the years to understand where spirit wants me to work. And so I just kind of trust and follow that. I think ayahuasca and being able to celebrate finally overcoming alcohol has been such a major transformation for me, a relief of suffering and psychological. The transformation just so profound that now I realize I'm really getting a second shot at life. And I have a new perspective on things. And so I definitely am leaning more towards offering myself to be in service to others, in alignment with natural law and the divine will. I've tried to settle down a few times and have kids and get married and gotten very close a few times, and it's just not for me. And I've also tried to have kids in the past, and I was unsuccessful with that, which was kind of a really tough thing for me to integrate, having to deal with miscarriages and not being able to have the traditional family lifestyle. And I think that's something we're going to be seeing a lot more people experiencing, that just as the nature of kind of the toxicity of our environment is people aren't going to be able to have that old traditional American dream. You may have a lot of people that are going to have to live without kids and without a spouse. And that is a much different experience to try to hold on to for 80, 90 years than to have a partner. So I kind of feel like society is moving towards that direction. I think a lot of that has been forced. But I'm saying I wasn't somebody who was able to fall into the traditional route, both through my own will and, with things outside of my responsibility. And I am very pleased with my present decision and the relationships that I've had. I definitely have more of, I'd say, magical occult relationships where we come together and we're doing some sort of spiritual work and growth, and we're helping with different missions or different communities. It feels like we're serving a much higher purpose than our own individual desires. And so that's kind of how I see, I guess, my future playing out.
Cool.
Just wherever spirit tells me to go, then I'm probably going to do it. I'm probably going to have some level of resistance as I continue to place, have some demands where I'm like, come on, you want me to do that? I thought I've given you enough and I've done enough work. And then I'll go and do it. And I'm like, man, that was the most beautiful experience. I'm so glad I got to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. I totally relate to that. Okay. Anything that you want to share that you haven't shared? Anything you're working on that you want to talk about? Any amazing thing you saw yesterday that you just popped up in your head and you want to tell us about before we go?
I had a really cool kind of synchronistic connection the other weekend with a group that I just happened to pop into my feed. And it was a person who was a psychic in a small mountain town that definitely way out of my norm, but I met some really cool people over there. So I'm getting a lot more local connections. So I'm probably going to be focused more on my in-person work, which is focused on addiction recovery, bereavement services, so grief work, and then also local communities in the spiritual type space. I've been doing a lot less videos and things on YouTube, mainly because I haven't had the outside feedback to help me to tailor where I should be putting my intention for some of those videos. I would like more feedback from people. Be like, hey, Aaron, we didn't understand what the hell you were talking about in this. Can you expand on it? Or, this didn't work. I don't know what you're doing over here. Or I've got these ideas or this vision. Can you help me unpack it? I would love to do more work like that and just helping other people with integration and navigating their visions and whatever I can do to help them out.
Fantastic.
Serving the big mission.
Fantastic. I will make sure and have all those links. Aaron has a nice link tree with all the links, but also call out some in there too. So thank you very much, Aaron. I have been Tyler Hurst of Microdose Yoga. That is Aaron, also known as the Wu Tai Watcher. So I very much appreciate having you on, and thank you very much for your time, dude.
Thank you, Tyler.
All right, we're going to stare at the camera for a little bit while I click stop.
That ceremony, I was at a really tough point in my life. I had to make a lot of changes that I didn't want to, and it really felt like I was going to die. So going to ceremony, I had the intention that I wanted to part of me needed to die so the new part of me could move on. I lost all sense of normal consciousness, and I definitely felt like my consciousness went into a different dimension where I became part of the world soul's cleaning process of consciousness.